Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, The Art of Reaching Your Guests Before, During, and After the Stay, presented by Stay in Touch, SHR, and Revinate. I'm your host, Frigola, and I'm joined by my panel today. First up is SHR's VP of Product, Estella Hale. Estella oversees all product development and support, systems operations, and client management services, including those for Windsurfer CRS. She has a rich hospitality background, having managed implementations and support for a hotel management group, in addition to managing client services departments and holding several guest and internal services positions at major hotel chains. Joining us from Revinate is Director of Global Field Marketing, Thomas Landon. Thomas is responsible for extending Revinate's thought leadership during overall marketing, operations, and building and maintaining relations with hoteliers, industry associates, and universities. Prior to joining Revinate, Thomas gained more than 10 years of international marketing and sales experience in the hospitality industry and worked at landmark hotels like the Fairmont San Francisco and St. Andrews Bay in Scotland. And rounding out our panel is Hyatt Adhanom. As Sales Director for Stay in Touch, he oversees growing partnerships in the U.S. Southwest and Western Europe. Hyatt has been in the cloud SaaS space for over 8 years, working with industries from healthcare to education, and now in hospitality, helping expand Stay in Touch's global reach. He enjoys working with companies ahead of the technology curve that are always displaying foresight in their respective industries and disrupting the paradigm via innovation. All right, time to run through the agenda, and we will get started. We'll start off by taking a look at the 5 stages that make up the complete guest journey. Our panel will then discuss how to reach your guests during the search and booking phase, creating a memorable experience for the guests on site, and turning satisfied guests into loyal, repeat customers. And finally, our panel will round out the discussion with some advice on what you can do today to start building a complete guest journey strategy. And of course, we'll be sure to leave some time for a Q&A session, so if you have any questions, feel free to send those on through the chat box at any time during the webinar. So let's get started. Before we get to the first discussion point, I'd like our audience to participate in 2 polls. All right, first poll is, does your hotel have a strategy in place to engage and connect with guests from search to stay to post-stay? Give you guys about a minute to complete this one, and then I'll launch the results. Right, about 30 more seconds here. Okay, I am closing the poll now and sharing the results. Does your hotel have a strategy in place to engage and connect with guests from search to stay to post-stay? 27% say yes, 48% of you say somewhat, 15% say not really, and 10% say not at all. All right, so plenty of advice for our presenters to address here. Let me go ahead and launch the second poll. What communication channels do you use to reach your guests before, during, or after their stay? Text message, email, telephone, Facebook, social media, or none? Give you guys about 30 seconds, and then I'll launch the results. Okay, about 15 more seconds. All right, I'm closing the poll now and sharing the results. What communication channels do you use to reach your guests before, during, or after their stay? 8% say text message, 65% say email, 6% say telephone, and 11% say Facebook or social media. Good thing only 10% say none. All right, so we will move along to the first discussion point. Understanding the complete guest journey. There are 5 stages to the guest journey. The first being inspiration stage. This is where travelers are always seeking for inspiration for their next adventure. In today's hyper-connected world, the ideas are always flowing, so you want to be able to get in front of them at this stage, ideally. And once they set their sights on the destination, they research, learn more about the destination, determine if it is ideal for them. That's really the planning stage for the traveler. And then, of course, in the booking stage, the traveler considers price, location, special offerings, and all other factors that are crucial to their desired experience. In the experience stage, now you've got the traveler in your sights. They're right there at your property. And it's essential that your staff is able to offer the guest a personalized, memorable experience that exceeds their expectations. And I think a lot of hotels forget this part, this sharing stage. Once they leave your hotel or your property, they haven't forgotten about the experience. More than likely, they've gone to social media and they've shared their experience, and they even do this during their experience. So the challenge for hotels is really converting guests into advocates, and thus loyal customers. If you can get them to speak on behalf of your hotel in a positive manner, then really that's a direct referral. And also, let's talk shortly or briefly about the changing guest landscape. How do you reach your guests at every stage of the guest journey? In today's digitally driven economy, you have to have a strategy. And according to Gallup's latest hospitality industry study, fully engaged guests, those who identify most strongly with the hotel, spent $588 per visit compared to $403 per visit for actively disengaged guests. So that is a huge opportunity for hotels to take into account, to understand who your guests are, because the more engaged they are, the more likely they are to actually spend more money at your hotel. Only 1 in 5 guests on average are fully engaged. This holds particularly true for Generation X, 22%, and Millennials, 20%. Baby boomers aren't that much better, but 25% were disengaged. So the positive in this is that these are comparatively low engagement percentages, indicate that hotels have serious potential to boost their business by doing more creative outreaches. So really prioritizing reaching out to guests and personalizing that experience throughout their stay, before their stay, after their stay, that's really going to help you as a hotelier bring in repeat customers. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter. She's going to lead this section, How to Reach Your Guests During the Search and Booking Phase. Estella?
Thank you very much, Free, and thank you for those stats. Those are so relevant and so important to take into consideration, and I think those also do validate the time and effort in putting this webinar together. So thank you for doing that, Free, and thank you for all of the attendees. Hopefully you'll find this very useful, and those stats give you the confirmation why it's important for you to have this time with us, and we thank you for that. Okay, so as Free was saying, there's different stages from inspiration, planning, booking, experience, and sharing of your guest. So we're going to talk right now a little bit about that search and booking experience. So there's several things for you to take into consideration. One of the things that we advocate is responsive design. So the way that we advocate for responsive design is really to address the cross-context reservations for devices today. Regardless of the demographics, the reality is that our guests, our public, are embracing every device. Therefore, when you're looking at presenting those reservation functions, you can do that as well. And you can do that by presenting that cross-context reservation, especially with mobile bookings becoming important, especially with those different stages happen in different devices. It could potentially be that an inspiration stage is happening on a tablet, while a planning or an actual booking state is happening on a desktop. So really making sure that that cross-context reservation experience follows the guest through those stages that we spoke about earlier becomes an important function for you to look at when you're serving that booking engine experience on your website, so that you're following those with your guest. And of course, as you are presenting that booking experience, the customized website branding of the booking experience. The navigation really should blend into your site. We, as hoteliers and servers of hoteliers, have become used to the experience of the booking widget that takes you from the site to the reservation path, and that is acceptable, and our guests and our public has accepted that. But still, we want to bring that as a blended, non-jarring experience, so they feel comfortable and confident continuing with that booking experience. Also, in regards to how you present the offers. So, Free, can we move to the next slide, please? Excuse me. So, let's say you've taken care of your booking experience being seamless. You've taken care of that booking experience being cross-context and really meeting your guest at every one of those stages, whether they're inspiration, planning, or booking. The goal is to get the guest to convert in that moment. If they're in that inspiration state, get them to convert. If they're in their planning stage, get them to convert. And of course, if they're in that booking stage, get them to convert. So doing things like bringing persuasive messaging, crafting that message and the verbiage that suits the target audience. From a hotel perspective, you spend your time creating the initiatives and creating your revenue management strategy of what you're going to publish online. Then make sure that how you're crafting the messages of those that are reaching your booking engine are persuasive and really captivating that moment. Other types of persuasive messaging that we recommend, it can be motivational, such as so many people have booked. It can be a third-party booking style, such as a strike-through. We know our guests are looking into many different sites, so taking advantage of something that they're used to, such as seeing a strike-through for a discount, can be very helpful. And then we go into blended rates. So blended rates is really encouraging the hotel to take the burden from the guest to bring them availability responses when their hotel is available. Not necessarily when a particular rate that they were looking for is available. It could be that that rate is not available one day, but why don't we take that burden from the guest and then we present other options and other rates and blend that experience, ensuring that the guest never has to see a negative message of non-availability. And we know it's easy to say to the guest, well, that particular selection is not available, try again. But let's take that burden, let's blend our rates and present it as an experience. If the hotel is available, then let's present it as such to the guest. So again, those past two slides, if you will, of the recommendation of how to present it from a device perspective, from a brand perspective, and then from an offer perspective are very relevant to your booking experience. But then let's talk about distribution in general. Thank you, Free. So clean distribution. So look at your central reservation system as that tool that is going to bring you that clean distribution across all channels. So for your call centers, make sure that you have channel-specific descriptions for them. It is perfectly okay if your revenue management strategy calls for some particular offers to only be available on the web. However, allowing for your call center to have that visibility and have the appropriate message of the best way to either convert that guest, upselling them, or directing them on the best way to book it, that is important. That is part of clean distribution. Of course, OTAs, use channels and use sub-channels. You can also use rate codes to identify the source of booking. So as we know, more and more networks or sites are being powered by the bigger players. You still want to know the source of that channel and that sub-channel. So use all of those tools from mapping all the way through identifying the guest and the profiles that are booking with those channels and sub-channels versus just one big bundle of everything is coming from an online travel agency. And we cannot forget the GDS, of course. So whatever you have as a good offering, put it on your GDS. Any strategy that you have for your GDS marketing, make sure that it goes into your overall marketing as to however it is that you're going to distribute to a particular market segment that you're chasing. Okay, so you now have looked at following the guest through the experience, following through the different stages with the cross context, you're presenting the right offers, you have good, clean distribution across your different channels. Now, let's get that information to your team. So the information flow becomes important. The information once that guest makes that reservation, with, are you getting all of the information that you can, especially from your own brand.com internet booking experience? Are you able to get those messages into systems that can allow you to reach that guest pre-stay, and of course can deliver it to someone in the front office if somebody's booking right outside of your property? And how you reach those guests after you've taken care of the experience, of that experience during booking, how do you take care of the experience of that guest, and how do you own that even before they walk in your door? So I'm going to pass it on to Thomas, and he can talk to you about that side.
Yeah. So as Free mentioned earlier, engagement is, I think, the key word at this point. So from that point where your guests have decided to book at your property, or they have made their decision, they have confirmed their reservation, it's key to communicate with your guest. And many hotels, unfortunately, kind of fail to do this. And I always make the example, think about the airlines. You usually get 2 or maybe 3 days up front, you get an email and say, hey, it's time to check in, and these are the rules and regulations, and this is what you can expect. And if you don't get that email, I get a little bit nervous when I don't get it, and I check, hey, is my reservation confirmed? So for hotels, it's key to do the same thing and start engaging and talking to this guest and reinforce their brand from the start. And we see this leading to additional revenue through upsells. This is a great time to upsell your guest into different services or into different room categories. You see it to leaving more happy guests because if they know what to expect, their stay will be more enjoyable for them. And we see it leading to more use of the facilities and the outlets that hotels have. Because when you promote them, guests actually know what they can do, and we see more use of that. And I think the key in this part is to automate this with PMS data and automate this whole process. Once the booking comes in, the check-in date, automatically set these emails to go out to the guest and tailor them based on personnel data, persona data, and PMS data like room type or booking channel. And if we go to the next slide, we have some stats of what we see in our data, what is actually working best. And we see that either 7 or 3 days actually lead to the best open rates and the best click-through rates for these pre-arrival emails. And as I'm a marketer for Revenate, and as we see 57% or even 61% when you use the word upgrade in the subject lines are open rates that you can only dream of. So your guests know that the emails are, they expect communication from you, so they really take the time to read and click through these emails. So make use of them. And on the right-hand side, we even see an uptake when you use the words either upgrade in the subject line or upgrade in the call to action. So those are key things to do to get even higher engagement rates with your guest. And from there, we move on to the on-site experience when the guests actually set foot in the door.
All right, Estella, Thomas, thank you so much for giving our audience really an in-depth look at how to convert guests and connect with them during the booking and the search phase. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Hyatt, who's going to be our lead presenter for the second section, creating a memorable experience for your guest on site.
Thanks, Free. I appreciate that. And I think that what we're seeing right now, all this information is it's kind of floating out there. It's all about micro moments, and it's about being able to capitalize on those micro moments. And it's kind of a combined approach, right? It's part of an equation where the experience and having that real-time engagement with the guests and giving them choice is going to be crucial. And so if we go to some of the stats behind this, some of the tangible data, I don't think this is surprising to anybody when it comes to the experience and the way consumers have really evolved, right? 84% of guests would take advantage of mobile check-in and check-out and utilize that experience. 60% would be more likely to stay if they have that option, and 70% of guests have used automated check-in kiosks and would do so again to avoid a line. And then I think a stat that's pretty obvious as well is 63% of travelers prefer hotels with tech-enabled lobbies. So what that really says, what the sum of all this data really is that, there's a glaring demand for a consistent mobile experience from the beginning of the guest life cycle all the way to when they're on property. And for us, we really have to be proactive and really capitalize on those micro moments that you have with guests and giving them choice in their stay from right before they arrive to when they get on property. So through mobile check-in and things like that, it allows you to really give that proactive experience. It allows you to get to know your guests more, prepare for them before they even arrive on property. And then when we look at things like self-service check-in, that automation aspect, being able to provide that option and that choice for a guest to do the check-in on their own. I know I've traveled a couple times to some self-service based hotels, and as a business traveler, that's really crucial for me, especially if I'm taking a red-eye flight. I'm taking an Uber to the hotel at 10 in the morning. If I'm able to do a mobile check-in in conjunction with a self-service check-in, that allows for that automation that I look for, and that's very valuable to me. So there's definitely a growing demand for that kind of experience. And then we talk about the ability to really capitalize on those micro moments with a guest, coming from when they make the reservation all the way down to the experience, right? And we think about being able to offer them amenities, things like that, but also giving them ownership over their stay. And if we think about how we as consumers interpret information and kind of the culture of immediacy we're in now, where it's all about those micro moments and being able to kind of dictate our service experience, whether it's buying a pizza to buying a house, and having that real-time access to the services that you're using as a consumer. And I think that that's very relevant to the opportunity in the hospitality space. And then from a hotel standpoint, if you look at that, that vantage point, you have the ability to capitalize on these micro moments. It's something where you can offer amenities, you can offer things like early check-in, upgrades, and what we're finding is that you're going to see conversions via these micro moments. This is how people buy now. They're very impulsive, for better or for worse. And when you're able to engage with the guest right before they arrive, maybe they're on vacation, maybe they are traveling for business and they need to check in early to get prepared for a meeting. You're not only driving service, but you're driving opportunity on the hotel side to capture additional revenue. And then it allows for that automation when we talk about being able to pick up your room keys, being able to ask for requests, whether it's extra towels, a bottle of champagne, a pack and play for your kid, whatever. It does allow for that proactive guest experience and guest communication with the property. So there's a huge opportunity here, and I think that if we think about the new and modern guest, whether it's a millennial all the way up to a baby boomer, they all have an aptitude for mobility. They all use mobility with all the other services, all the other consumer-facing services. So this is a very glaring opportunity, and I'll leave with a stat on the airline industry, which is the airline industry drives about 12% of their ancillary revenue, so that add-on revenue that becomes very valuable through mobile. The hospitality industry is doing about 2%. So like Thomas had mentioned, mimicking that will drive significant revenue opportunities for a hotel as well. And if we look at the holistic experience and what this does for the mobile guest and that convenience that you provide to the guest, how that translates into your service scores. Things have changed in terms of how hotels are looked at now. Guests appreciate a commitment to their experience, and you're going to see that pay dividends in your GSI and GSS scores, because it's going to show up on these TripAdvisor reviews, on these other reviews online. That is really the first place that people look to when they're considering a property. And I'm actually going to pass it off to Estella now.
Thank you, Hyatt.
Yeah, no problem.
My main comment here is, really looking at the integration points between your systems as you're looking and implementing some of these wonderful practices that your guests are now expecting more and more. And as your guests start adopting those, then have your providers talk to each other. That's why I like doing these type of webinars when there's multiple players in the industry and we're all talking and communicating together in regards to our recommendations. From a hotel perspective, also have your vendors talk and say, hey, I'm now implementing this effort. I'm reaching out to my guests so they are able to do this. They are able to do mobile check-in. Okay, are you communicating that? And are those points going across between the systems? So just, yes, as you implement these efforts, keep that integration communication open and make sure that every point that can be part of that integration is actually implemented.
All right, thank you to Hyatt and Estelle for their take on how to actually connect with the guest and how to keep your systems connected during the guest stay. And with that, we're going to move forward to our next discussion point, which is turning satisfied guests into loyal repeat customers. And Thomas is going to be the lead on this one.
Thank you, Free. So we have almost completed the journey, and from looking into booking into the on-site experience, and this is the last part of the guest journey. And this is really the moment to continue the relationship with your guest and make it the start of a longer relationship moving forward. And the ultimate goal is actually drive repeat guest and drive repeat business, because you want your guest to come back. And there's multiple ways to do that, but the key is to remember is that you have an existing relationship with your guest. The guest stayed at your house. It's a very intimate relationship. They've been at your property. They slept in your bed. So use that relationship to as a starting point. And the key is to start the relationship early. We see often that hotels just add them to a blanket mailing list, and 3-4 months later to get an offer. And then people have long moved on with the things that they've been doing and kind of forgot about their stay and forgot about the experience they had. So just, besides adding them to the mailing list, start a relationship now and starting that quickly. And if we go to the next slide, we have some stats on that, what we see in our data and what we see our marketing product users driving success and driving with the post-stay communications. So as an average, we have about 33% open rates, but the biggest success we see, either 2 days after the stay or 7 days after the stay, with, again, open rates that are way beyond industry average. And my key would be saying test this for your property. If you have a resort type, People might need to travel a little bit longer before they get back home, so you might want to wait a little bit longer before sending them a message, or if you have a city hotel, it might be a little bit shorter. But again, these stats show that there's real engagement from the audience on the emails that have been sent, so make use of this opportunity. So how do you do this? On the next slide, I've posted some examples of emails and some ideas to use, and what I want to talk you through is some of the filters that you can use, first of all, to tailor these messages to your audience. So one thing to do definitely is to exclude future reservations. If you're going to drive promotions and people already have reservations on the books, make sure you take these out. And as you see on the right-hand side, you can also tailor the messages and exclude detractors, people that, unfortunately didn't have a good stay, or there was something wrong during their experience on site and something happened. Send them a different message and filter these people out. But also use filters based on preferences that people have. If they're spa users, again, a different message than golf users, again, a different message than other audiences. But you can also look in PMS data in terms of total spend, total stays, booking channel, and rate code. So really driving that, tailoring that audience and driving the right message to the right person. And the key, one tip, email marketing is a whole topic on itself, but one tip I do want to talk about is the subject line that you use. And this is really the key and the first thing that people say when seeing your email, and it's the best thing where you can start improving on. And from research, 33% of the recipients opens an email just based on the subject line alone. So try this out, test what the best message is, and see what works best with your audiences. And some tips is build curiosity. Questions are always a good thing. Why now is the best time to book your vacation in Hawaii? Or do you know this? Or that drives to more opens. Also, the use of numbers. If you use numbers in the subject line, there's great, at least to more opens. So an example would be 3 ways to spend your Eastern weekend. Other things is to create a sense of urgency. Book now and save would be a great open line for people that have booked. And keep the subject line short. Use the attractive and most important words so people see that first of all and open that and start reading your email. And also, again, key is to personalize and localize. Use the person's name, Thomas, thank you for staying at our hotel, or use the city. And we see this using, an average of 22% open rate. So the key takeaways for the post-stay journey is continue the relationship with your guest and use that. Your guests have been in your hotel, so make advantage of that, take advantage of that moment. And then the key is to automate it and set it and forget it. Set the automation, set the targeting of the audiences, and then let these campaigns work for you and let them drive revenue for you. And as you look at your audiences and learn more about your audiences in terms of data that you collect from your PMS, for example, you can start thinking about the right message for the right guests and how to filter that. All right, that was my portion on the post-stay.
Thank you, Thomas. I think that is very important, and I think some of the points that you make, such as asking questions and using numbers, can help a lot of our audience. I really like the idea to bring those personalized messages using first or last name. And basically what we also recommend is for hotels that have a profile management, that have a customer relationship management, to make sure that those guest profiles are recognized, whether it is when they're checking in, when they're checking out, just making sure that you do recognize that guest during their stay, and then just generate, whether it's rates or messages, as Thomas suggested, and then enable that authentication for guests to sign up and to register for that program during the whole booking flow. And I think that is what then brings the personalization. That is what brings the championing and the sharing after you've already served that guest and served that experience.
Okay. So, in terms of how to kind of leverage mobility to drive loyalty, and talking about some of the factors that go into that, and how to really come up with a seamless strategy. I think that a lot of the things that Estella and Thomas have mentioned kind of tied together, right, in terms of the consistent guest experience, and one that is personalized from the inception, the reservation, all the way down to the marketing, the emails that you send to them, all the way to when they arrive on property. And I think that a very important statistic to consider is the fact that, according to a Harvard review, customers who had the best experience spend about 140% are compared to those who had poor experiences. So, I think that shows that, if you are able to address a person's preferences, what they like, what they don't like, and really be proactive and prepare for them, they're going to pay that back in the form of, additional services and loyalty to your guest. And I think another thing that we have to think about is the actual check-in process and how you can use a lot of this intel, a lot of this information from, the CRS all the way down to the email marketing, how you can leverage that. So when they get there, if they like a certain newspaper, if they like having champagne in their room, and also kind of having an awareness of when they're going to be arriving there, you can ensure a seamless check-in and check-out, which is really one of the most important aspects of the guest journey, which is that initial physical impression they get of your hotel. So using that information to provide that proactive experience, and then we talk about enabling guest preference information and being able to capture that quickly. You can do that in many of the touch points that we talk about, whether it's CRS all the way down to the PMS, right? If you have a mobile PMS that allows for you to walk up to a guest and check them in quickly, you have more time to have a small chat, understand why they're there, what they like, what they prefer, shows they like to see, so that will, funnel into the CRM when you enter that into, into your PMS. So that there's a lot of different aspects of the touch points that you can leverage, not only for the experience, but also going forward in communicating with the guest afterwards. And then you want to, be able to ask for information very quickly. Have, when the guest enters in via mobile check-in, when they're arriving, you have the ability to then streamline that and make that a lot quicker of an engagement and actually capture that more relevant detail to their preferences.
All right. I want to thank all of our speakers today for really taking our audience through the inspiration stage all the way down to the sharing stage, with opportunities along the way from search to stay to post-stay to really convert and engage with the guest and keep them connected. And with that said, this is our last discussion point before we turn it over to the audience for a Q&A. Our presenters are going to give their take on what you can do today to start building a guest journey strategy. And Estella, I'll let you go first here.
Thank you, Free. Well, again, these are pretty straightforward. One is make sure that your systems are freely talking to each other. So as you take some of these nuggets, as you implement them into your property, and as you are doing some of these initiatives, see the entire ecosystem and how all systems can talk to each other so that you have that consistent experience through the entire booking journey. Also, we recommend for you to audit all of your guest-facing systems at least twice a year, and then anything that you find, just do updates and see what effect that has. So really play the role of the guest and play that role regularly. See what they get to see and actually go through the entire experience as they would, and remember the points that Free gave all of us at the beginning of the presentation, and follow those points from inspiration to planning to booking to experience and sharing. Just play that role and see what they see. Hyatt?
Yes, thanks, Estella. Great points. Yeah, I think that continuity of providing a mobile journey is something that a lot of hoteliers are thinking about now, and I think that you want to look at tangible and realistic ways for your property or your group to increase that engagement via mobility, whether that's SMS, whether that's mobile check-in and mobile checkout, and having that continuity of data through the booking all the way down to the CRM and post-stay. So I think that mobile check-in is something that's here to stay. Obviously, guests are not going to leave. Mobility and guests using their mobile devices is not going away at all. So think about realistic ways for you to increase those mobile touch points throughout their experience. And then when you're thinking about the guest experience, being able to automate that, when a guest is leaving the property, or if they're on property, if you have something that allows for real-time messaging, trying to get their feedback and capture that information, understand what their experience has been. Even with mobile checkout, you have the ability to offer the guest satisfaction survey as a part of that sequence, right? So that you can capture that data and their experience in terms of that process as well. So there's a lot of things out there. I'd say the strongest ones are having an SMS strategy that combines with a mobile check-in option that allows for a proactive guest experience. Thomas?
Yeah, and as last points, Estella touched upon this, and I think this is key. Make sure, my first one is make sure that your design of all your guest communications is the same. So regardless if the way that your front desk staff talks to your guest versus the emails that you send versus the tone of voice that you use on your website, make sure that all the guest-facing attributes have the same look, feel, and type of messaging. And we see that often being very discontinued throughout the whole process. And the other thing is to make your life easier as hoteliers, set it and forget it. Automation, segmentation, and automation of segmentation are key to drive revenue and drive these processes. Of course, we have to make sure that your systems talk freely, as Estella mentioned, but then it shouldn't be a full-time job to send out all your guest communications. It should be something that runs through the system, and you just make adds and tweaks and improvements as you see the data flowing in. And that's possible these days with technology, and let technology do the work for you.
All right, that was awesome. To our presenters, thank you guys again. I'm going to open the floor to our audience. We already got some questions flowing in, but again, I want to encourage you guys to ask more questions. This is your section. We want to hear your feedback, your concerns, and hopefully I'm sure our presenters can address them head on. With that said, I'm going to address the first question to all of our presenters. What do you find is the best way to communicate with guests throughout their travel journey? And I'll start with Hyatt.
Well, I just mentioned that, and I think SMS and email combined are very effective. I think the open rate for email on average is about 50%, whereas SMS is about 95%. So response rate, or at least open rate. So having that in plan, or that in as a part of your plan for your outreach and your communication with guests, I think is crucial. And then that uniformity that Estella and Thomas mentioned, having data continuity so that you can have a consistent guest service experience from the virtual guest experience all the way down to the actual property, on-property experience, I think is crucial.
Right, Estella?
I agree with Hyatt. I think definitely those are email, being able to reach them, SMS, it's important, but also you want to take into consideration the stage at which the guest is. If you're marketing at them, maybe email is more conducive. If they're in property, maybe SMS is an easier and faster way. They're not checking their emails, but they're in your property. You can get to them right away. So I still think those are great methods, but as Thomas was saying earlier, it depends on your type of property. So how many days before are you communicating as you're doing your pre-stay or your market, and then when they're in-house, the communication changes and it becomes more immediate and maybe even a different type.
All right. Thomas, maybe can you answer something a little more specific? How important are chatbots?
Great question. More and more, you know, and again, that comes to the automation. I think the challenge is for the chatbots is, first of all, how do you implement it as a hotel, and secondly is what guest can you reach? So to go back a little bit in time to the earlier question, I said like, hey, text message is very important. It can be an excellent channel for you know, when guests are, for example, in stay. But we saw earlier on the survey that only 8% of all the properties use it, of all the respondents on this survey for this webinar. And it comes down to the point is like, hey, do you have enough mobile numbers in your database? You can set up a whole system where you can do text message, but if you only have, you know, 10 or 12% mobile numbers of all your profiles, it's not really worth it. And the same with chat. If you do chat and, for example, automated on your website, that we see that as a very effective way and a very natural way to drive bookings. But chat, for example, through Facebook, you need to make sure that you have the Facebook profiles before you actually can start automated chat sessions with your guest.
All right, so this is another question for all three presenters. We've been making a real effort to be more proactive when it comes to gathering guest data, especially to enrich our loyalty programs. What are some ways we can gather data without annoying our guests too much? Estella, you can start this one.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's an interesting one, and there is a fine balance, as Hayat was saying earlier, in requesting way too much information when they're shopping and even when they're checking in, to the point of not annoying them, but then also, as Thomas was just saying, having relevant information so we can communicate with them. So look at some of those important points. Look at the point of email. Look at the point of being able to message them. We see now more and more alias emails being used for reservations that are coming from a third-party channel. So it could be that the reservation comes and that email field is already filled out. So just be proactive in checking, you know, is this a real email? Is it an alias email? You know, and then make it known to the guest why it's of their service that you're updating or editing that information.
All right, Thomas, any suggestions on how to collect more guest data?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and I think the first thing is asking questions. It cannot. My most common question that I have is when I travel. It's like, hey, would you like me to email the receipt to you? And it's the best and cleanest way to ask for an email address, because if you give an email address for the receipt, here you go. The second thing, what some hotels do, and again depends on the service level, and actually can you do something with it? It's like, oh, I see you booked a double room or booked a one king bed. Is this something you would like to be noted in your guest profile? And I have front desk agents ask me. Where it comes in, the caveat a little bit is like, hey, if you collect a lot of guest data just for the sake of guest data and you don't do anything with it, it gets a little, quote unquote, annoying. So, for example, if I indicated that I want a king bed, but I always get assigned a double, why do you ask me the question in the first place? And progressive profiling. So make a path of what key information do you want to have first. So probably, first name, last name, location, email address, and go down a path of like questions you can ask for every time or every touch point. So you have kind of a journey of questions you can ask throughout the stay.
All right, Hayat, this one is for you. Do you have to invest in a mobile app to offer mobile check-in?
Well, that's a great question. I think, maybe 5 years ago, everyone would say yes, right? But now when we look at the data, right, and we look at the actual conversion of mobile apps, it can be a part of your equation when it comes to the touch points with guests and the guest experience. But the conversion rate for apps is about 5 to 10% across the industry, right? And you want to have a kind of diversified way to connect with the guest, because it's unlikely for a guest to download an app if they're staying for business for 2 days, and you got to go and create a username and a password and add an app on your phone. So it is a little unlikely. So when looking at mobile touch points, throughout the guest journey, have more web-based options, something that is agnostic, that can be used on any device, where a login and password doesn't have to be created, and where it's automatically getting sent out from the PMS or from the CRM and things like that. So I think that's kind of the answer with NAP. It can be a supplemental tool, but it shouldn't be the basis of your engagement with the guests via their mobile devices.
All right, thanks for that, Hyatt. And Estella, this one's for you. What do you feel are the top 3 features that you have to have in a booking engine?
I would say having a good experience regardless of the device of how a guest is reaching you. So cross context. Again, as we said, some guests do the full route of inspiration, planning, and then booking. Others, because of the circumstance of their travel, can go straight to booking. So just to have that cross-context experience. Branding, of course, configurable, seamless branding. Own the full experience from every stage. And then I would say the third thing may be merchandising. Your brand and your hotel knows best how and what to offer and what is the value and the appeal to the guest. So being able to have a booking experience that allows you to merchandise your offer and your value to the guest as you deem best.
All right. We have one more question here for you, Thomas. What is the importance of segmentation, and what is an ideal audience size for the best results?
The importance is huge. There is a clear correlation between the audience size of where you send your messages and your emails and the open and engage rates. And the ideal audience size is a little bit more difficult to define, but we see in our data that emails that have less than 1,000 recipients are performing the best. What is, again, it comes down to what is also workable for you as a hotel, and how can you use kind of the same offer, but in different looks and shapes and feels to different audiences, so to make the process a little bit more scalable. A good example might be, sending the same offer but with a different picture of a family or a different picture of, a couple traveling to, if you mark that in your database, couples or families, can lead to much better results in terms of opens and clicks and actually driving revenue in the back end. So segmentation is key, and these days with technology you can automate the segmentation. So your segmentation lists are fluid and updating themselves based on the guest behavior.
All right, that wraps up today's webinar and the Q&A session. I want to thank our presenters once again for their insight, for sticking around for the questions and answering them to your ability. And I want to thank our audience for sticking around the whole way through as well. Please send any additional questions or comments to info@stayintouch.com, and we will be sure to reply and have any of our presenters reach out and answer those questions directly. And you will receive a webinar recording and the presentation within 24 hours of the live broadcast. And again, if you have any questions, send them over to info@stayintouch.com. Thank everyone again. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.